There are millions of worlds in our galaxy. I should know. For 3 centuries, I served as an archivist of the Galactic Coalition, cataloging civilizations, recording wars, and documenting the rise and fall of empires that once believed themselves eternal. Some planets glitter with wealth, entire continents of rare metals and oceans filled with energy-rich compounds. Others are nightmares, inhabited by species so violent that even the most ambitious conquerors dare not approach them. A few worlds are simply avoided, not because they are powerful, but because they are mysterious. Earth was never supposed to be one of those worlds. When the planet first appeared in our long-range survey records, it seemed utterly unremarkable. A small blue sphere orbiting an average yellow star near the outer spiral of the Orion Arm. Its native species, humans, had only recently begun to experiment with primitive spaceflight. Their civilization was fractured into competing nations. Their technology was inconsistent, their politics unstable, their military capabilities limited to the fragile atmosphere of their own planet. In every measurable way, Earth was categorized as a Class 3 developing civilization. In simpler terms, prey. I remember the day the planet's file was first presented to the Galactic Assembly. The chamber itself was immense, a vast circular hall suspended above the shimmering core of the Coalition's capital station. Representatives from hundreds of civilizations sat within that chamber. Warlords, diplomats, explorers, historians. Each one studying the rotating projection of the planet Earth. Blue oceans, white cloud bands, green continents. A quiet, fragile world. Naturally, the proposals came quickly. The resources alone justify acquisition. The species appears physically weak. Their technological level suggests minimal resistance. The Vrax Dominion envoy even laughed as he reviewed the human military reports. Your surveys claim these creatures still fight wars among themselves using projectile weapons, he said with amusement. The chamber echoed with mild laughter. Primitive, divided, defenseless. In the long history of the galaxy, civilizations like that rarely lasted long once discovered. The first formal invasion proposal was submitted less than an hour after the planet's introduction. And then something strange happened. The proposal was denied. Not publicly, not dramatically, it was simply dismissed. At first, no one caught much of it. The Assembly processed thousands of planetary claims every cycle. Perhaps the request had violated some obscure protocol. So another faction submitted their own proposal. Denied. Then another. Denied again. Quietly. Efficiently. Without explanation. I remember watching the older representatives in that chamber during those discussions. The elders of ancient civilizations. The ones whose species had walked among the stars for tens of thousands of years. They were not laughing. They were not even speaking. They simply watched the rotating image of Earth with expressions that were difficult to interpret. Concern. Discomfort. Something close to fear. Soon the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every attempt to propose military action against Earth vanished into procedural silence. No debate, no justification, just rejection. Curiosity spread through the Assembly like a slow infection. Why? The planet had no orbital defense grid, no visible fleet, no planetary shield arrays. Even the pirate syndicates, those opportunistic predators who would attack nearly anything for profit, refused contracts involving Earth. One mercenary guild issued a statement so brief it became legendary among our historians. We do not hunt that world. No explanation followed. Whispers began circulating through the diplomatic channels of the coalition. Ancient empires refused to discuss the subject. Military strategists changed the topic whenever Earth appeared in strategic briefings. Even scholars, curious creatures by nature, avoided the question entirely.
It was as though the entire galaxy had silently agreed on a rule: do not touch Earth. Eventually, someone asked the question out loud. I remember that moment clearly. A young commander from a recently spacefaring species rose from his seat during an assembly session. He was ambitious, confident, and completely unaware of the weight of history surrounding the subject he was about to raise. He gestured toward the floating projection of Earth. If the planet is truly this vulnerable, he asked, why has no one taken it? His voice echoed across the chamber. And then, silence. A silence so complete that even the hum of the station's gravity generators seemed louder. Hundreds of representatives looked at one another. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others simply stared at the image of the blue planet rotating above us. The young commander repeated the question. If the world is defenseless, why does no one claim it? No one answered. Not the admirals, not the diplomats, not the ancient civilizations who had watched empires rise and fall long before humanity discovered electricity. Because the truth was something none of them wanted to say aloud. Not in that chamber. Not where ambitious warlords might hear it. Not where curiosity could become recklessness. But the galaxy has always had a weakness: pride and curiosity. Eventually, one empire decided the silence itself was an insult: the Vrax Dominion. They were powerful, they were ruthless, and most importantly, they believed fear was something that happened to other species. So they made a decision. If the galaxy refused to explain why Earth remained untouched, they would discover the reason themselves. And that decision would become one of the most expensive mistakes in galactic history. Because the moment their invasion fleet began preparing for launch, the older civilizations of the galaxy stopped asking questions. They already knew what was coming, and they were not eager to watch it happen again. But the Vrax did not know that. Not yet. And soon, neither would their fleet.
The Vrax Dominion had never been a patient empire. For nearly 1,000 standard cycles, their history had followed a single, brutally effective formula. Find a weaker civilization, overwhelm it with force, and add its worlds to the Dominion's expanding territory. It was not subtle. It was not diplomatic. But it worked. Entire sectors of the galaxy had fallen beneath the Dominion's banners through sheer intimidation. Their fleets were vast, their soldiers relentless, and their commanders believed one simple truth above all others: power belonged to those willing to take it. So, when the reports about Earth reached the Dominion War Council, the reaction was predictable: opportunity. A world rich with water, fertile biospheres, and mineral reserves, a species numbering in the billions, a civilization technologically primitive by galactic standards, and most importantly, a planet with no visible defenses. To the Dominion, this was not a mystery. It was an invitation. The high strategist of the Vrax Dominion reportedly laughed when the Coalition's survey data was presented. A world this exposed, he declared, exists only because no one has bothered to claim it. Within weeks, the Dominion began preparing an invasion. Not a small expeditionary force, not a quiet occupation fleet. The Dominion believed in overwhelming certainty. Hundreds of warships were assembled, armored cruisers capable of cracking planetary defenses, carrier vessels carrying thousands of strike fighters, and massive orbital assault platforms designed to dominate entire star systems. At the center of it all stood the Dominion flagship, a dreadnought nearly 20 kilometers long. Its weapon arrays alone were capable of erasing a city in a single volley. The fleet's destination was simple: Sol, Earth's star system. Across the galaxy, observers noticed the mobilization almost immediately. Dominion fleets did not move quietly. Sensor networks tracked the armada as it assembled near the edge of Dominion space, a dark cloud of metal and energy signatures growing larger by the hour. Speculation spread quickly. Some civilizations predicted Earth would surrender before the first shot was fired.
Others expected the humans to fight briefly before being overwhelmed. A few analysts even speculated that Earth's divided governments would collapse internally the moment an alien armada appeared above their skies. But the older civilizations reacted differently. Several ancient empires quietly withdrew their observation satellites from the Sol region. Military academies removed the system from active simulation exercises, and more than one elder species did something that puzzled younger observers. They simply turned off their sensors, refusing to watch what came next. At the time, no one understood why, but I remember watching the fleet enter Sol's system. I was an observer then, assigned to record the event for Coalition archives. The Dominion Armada emerged from faster-than-light transit beyond the orbit of the outer gas giants. Hundreds of vessels unfolded into formation like predators surrounding prey. From a tactical perspective, the invasion was flawless. The fleet advanced inward in layered formations, escort fighters screening the larger capital ships while long-range weapons powered up across the Armada. There was no resistance, no warning shots, no hidden defense stations. Earth's system was quiet. Too quiet, some might say. But the Dominion commanders saw something else entirely. They saw confirmation. The blue planet rotated peacefully beneath its atmosphere, oceans reflecting the light of its star. Clouds drifted across the continents in slow, harmless patterns. Civilization lights glittered faintly along the night side. Billions of humans continued their lives, seemingly unaware that an alien armada now surrounded their world. No orbital defense grid activated, no fleet launched to intercept the invaders, no emergency transmissions filled the communication channels. Just silence. Dominion commanders found the situation hilarious. Reports from the fleet indicate laughter filled the command decks. One officer allegedly remarked that conquering Earth would require less effort than subduing a minor pirate outpost. So the Dominion did what conquerors have done for millennia. They issued an ultimatum. A single message was transmitted toward the planet's communication networks. It was translated into dozens of human languages simultaneously. The message was short, direct, and entirely predictable. Surrender your world, and you will be spared. The Dominion commanders expected panic. They expected frantic negotiations from the planet's governments. They expected fear. Instead, they received a reply. The response arrived only minutes later. It did not come from a single nation or a single authority. Instead, it appeared across every communication channel the Dominion had opened, broadcast simultaneously. One message, one sentence. Simple, calm, almost polite. You really shouldn't do this. That was all. No threats, no declarations of war, no displays of defiance, just a quiet warning. The Dominion commanders interpreted it exactly as you might expect, as a bluff. After all, what threat could a primitive world possibly pose to a fleet capable of conquering entire star systems? The flagship admiral reportedly replayed the human message several times before dismissing it with amusement. Desperation, he said, nothing more. The invasion continued. Attack formations moved into position. Orbital bombardment systems powered up. Targeting computers locked onto military installations scattered across Earth's continents. At the command signal, the fleet prepared to begin the first strike. And across the galaxy, millions of observers watched the moment humanity's homeworld stood alone against an empire. Most believed they were about to witness the swift conquest of a defenseless species. They were wrong, because the moment the Dominion fleet initiated its attack protocols, something unexpected happened. Not explosions, not defensive fire, something far more confusing. Their ships began to malfunction. At first, the problems were small. A navigation system here, a sensor array there, minor technical glitches that occasionally occur when complex fleets enter unfamiliar star systems. But then the failures started spreading. Targeting systems refused to lock onto their objectives. Communication channels filled with static. Navigation computers began producing contradictory flight paths. Within minutes, confusion spread across the Dominion fleet. And then, the first warship fired on its own formation. Not intentionally. Its targeting systems had simply changed. The Dominion commanders stared in disbelief as their perfect invasion began to unravel. They had expected fear, resistance, maybe even a desperate last stand. What they had not expected was to lose control of their entire fleet. And that was the moment the galaxy learned its first lesson. Humans did not always fight their enemies directly. Sometimes, they simply took control of the battlefield itself.
The first Dominion warships entered Earth's orbit without resistance. No defensive formations rose to meet them. No intercept fleets launched from hidden bases. No massive weapon platforms emerged from the shadows of the asteroid belt. To the Dominion commanders, the situation confirmed everything they believed about the planet. Earth was unprepared, vulnerable, helpless. Their warships spread across the upper atmosphere like a steel storm, massive hulls casting moving shadows across the blue oceans below. Fighter squadrons deployed from carrier bays, streaking through the thin black of near orbit as targeting systems began cataloging strategic objectives. Military bases, energy grids, communication hubs, cities. The Dominion did not intend a slow conquest. Their strategy was simple: demonstrate overwhelming force so quickly that resistance became impossible. Orbital cannons began charging, targeting arrays locked onto coordinates across Earth's surface. The fleet's command network synchronized every vessel for a coordinated strike. One command, hundreds of weapons firing simultaneously. A planetary civilization erased in minutes. But before the command could be given, something strange happened. At first, the malfunction seemed insignificant. A destroyer on the edge of formation reported a brief failure in its navigation systems. Its guidance array recalibrated automatically, restoring control within seconds. The incident was dismissed as a routine glitch. Then, another ship reported sensor interference. Moments later, a cruiser's weapons control console froze mid-calibration. The Dominion's engineers assumed the fleet was encountering unexpected electromagnetic disturbances from Earth's magnetosphere. Unusual, perhaps, but not impossible. Yet the problems did not stop. They spread. Navigation computers across multiple ships began producing conflicting trajectory calculations. Autopilot systems disengaged without warning. Communication channels between vessels started filling with bursts of static and corrupted data packets. Coordination, normally flawless, began to fracture. Commanders demanded status reports. Technicians scrambled across control decks, attempting to isolate the source of the failures. But every time a problem was corrected, two more appeared somewhere else. The Dominion flagship attempted to stabilize the situation by switching to an isolated command network, a secure system disconnected from the rest of the fleet. Even that failed. And then, the first warship lost control entirely. The cruiser Vraxel Prime suddenly veered off its assigned orbit, thrusters firing unpredictably as its navigation system began executing random course corrections. Moments later, its weapons array activated without authorization. Energy cannons swung toward a nearby Dominion frigate. The crew tried to override the command. They never had the chance. The cruiser fired. The frigate vanished in a flash of plasma and expanding debris. For several seconds, the fleet's command network fell into stunned silence. Then, chaos erupted. Because the cruiser's targeting system was still active, and it was no longer recognizing Dominion vessels as allies. Across the Armada, systems began failing faster. Weapons control consoles locked themselves behind encryption protocols the Dominion engineers could not bypass. Internal diagnostics started reporting contradictory results. Reactor monitors displayed phantom overload warnings. Even life support systems began adjusting environmental controls without command input. Entire warships were losing the ability to operate their own machines. Imagine commanding a vessel capable of surviving a supernova's shockwave and discovering that you cannot even open a door. That was the reality spreading through the Dominion fleet. Ships drifted helplessly through orbit as propulsion systems shut down. Fighters tumbled through space after their navigation software collapsed.
Targeting arrays began randomly switching between friendly and hostile designations. Warships fired on one another without warning. Some detonated their own missile racks when corrupted launch protocols activated. The once perfect invasion formation dissolved into a cloud of drifting metal, scattered debris, and panicked transmissions. Dominion commanders demanded answers. None came, because the truth was something their military doctrine had never prepared them to face. Earth's defenses had finally activated, but they were not what anyone expected. There were no massive cannons emerging from underground silos, no hidden battle stations rising from beneath the oceans, no fleets of warships waiting behind the moon. Instead, the battlefield itself had changed. Long before the Dominion fleet ever entered the Sol system, humanity had already begun fighting. Not with weapons, with information. Decades earlier, human scientists had reached a terrifying conclusion about modern warfare. The most powerful weapon in the galaxy was not firepower, it was control. Control of communication, control of navigation, control of the invisible digital networks that connected every advanced machine. Every warship in the Dominion fleet depended on billions of lines of code to function. Targeting algorithms, flight control systems, reactor management programs, communication protocols. Each system designed to operate flawlessly under the most extreme conditions imaginable. But all of them shared one weakness. They relied on information. And humanity had spent decades mastering the art of rewriting it. Hidden across Earth's continents were thousands of data centers, vast networks of quantum processors and artificial intelligences designed for one purpose: cyber warfare. Not the small-scale electronic attacks used by most civilizations. Humanity had built something far larger. A planetary defense grid made entirely of algorithms. Invisible, silent, and terrifyingly effective. The moment the Dominion fleet opened its communication channels to broadcast their ultimatum, they unknowingly opened the door. Human systems infiltrated the fleet's networks in seconds. Encryption protocols were studied, broken, and rewritten. Operating systems were copied and modified. Command hierarchies were altered. Every ship became a battlefield, every computer a weapon, and the Dominion never even saw their enemy. Across the fleet, entire operating systems were quietly replaced with human-designed code. Navigation computers began following new instructions. Targeting systems received altered identification signals. Communication networks were flooded with corrupted data streams that disguised the attack. By the time Dominion engineers realized something was wrong, it was already too late. The fleet no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the humans. Warships fired on one another as targeting systems misidentified allies as enemies. Missile racks launched volleys into empty space. Thrusters engaged randomly, scattering vessels across orbital trajectories. Within minutes, the unstoppable Dominion armada had become a graveyard of silent metal drifting above the quiet blue planet. No explosions, no heroic last stands. Just hundreds of ships, helpless, disabled, captured without a single shot fired from the planet below. Across the galaxy, observers watched the disaster unfold in stunned disbelief. Because this was not how wars were fought. Civilizations built bigger weapons, stronger fleets, more powerful shields. Humanity had done something entirely different. They had turned the enemy's own technology against them. And in doing so, they revealed something far more frightening than a hidden fleet. Earth never needed visible defenses, because their real weapons were already inside the machines of their enemies. And as the last Dominion warship drifted powerless above the quiet blue planet, a terrifying realization spread across the observing civilizations. Humanity had not simply defended their world. They had taken control of an entire invasion fleet without firing a single shot. But the lesson was not over yet, because the humans were about to do something even more unexpected. Something that would confuse the galaxy even more than their invisible war.
Instead of destroying the helpless fleet, they were coming to save it.
In war, there is a moment that defines victory. For most civilizations, that moment comes when the enemy fleet burns, when shattered hulls drift through space and the victors stand alone over the battlefield. But humanity did not follow that rule. When the Dominion fleet fell silent above Earth, its systems hijacked, its weapons useless, its ships drifting helplessly through orbit, the galaxy expected the inevitable conclusion: destruction. It would have been easy. Hundreds of enemy warships floated powerless around the planet. Their reactors were exposed, their shields offline, their targeting systems compromised. A single coordinated strike from even a modest planetary defense grid could have erased the entire armada in minutes. The Dominion had come to conquer. They had threatened the extinction of a species. No one in the galaxy would have questioned humanity's right to retaliate. But the humans did not fire. Instead, their ships appeared. At first, the observers monitoring the battle assumed these were the long-hidden war vessels Earth had been concealing. After all, a civilization capable of crippling a Dominion invasion fleet must possess some terrifying arsenal. Surely now those weapons would emerge. But the vessels rising from Earth's atmosphere were not warships. They were small, compact, almost fragile in appearance compared to the massive Dominion cruisers surrounding the planet. Their hulls were smooth and unadorned, built for practical efficiency rather than intimidation. No towering weapon arrays aligned their surfaces, no heavy armor plating suggested designs meant for combat. They looked like utility craft, transports, support vessels, rescue ships. The first human craft approached the drifting Dominion destroyer that had lost life support during the system collapse. Instead of weapons, it extended mechanical docking arms. Airlocks connected. Boarding teams entered the vessel. Dominion commanders watching from the few remaining functional sensor feeds assumed the humans were finally beginning their counterattack. They expected sabotage, captures, executions. Instead, the humans activated emergency medical protocols. Injured Dominion soldiers were carried out of their own warship by the very species they had come to enslave. Medical drones stabilized wounded crew members. Portable atmosphere generators restored breathable air to damaged compartments. Human engineers moved through the crippled vessel, sealing hull breaches and stabilizing its failing reactor. Across the fleet, the same strange pattern began repeating. Human ships approached drifting Dominion vessels. Docking ports opened. Boarding teams entered. And instead of fighting, they rescued. The narrator paused for a moment when recounting this part of history in the Coalition's archives, because even now, centuries later, it remains difficult to explain. Humanity had every reason to destroy that fleet. Strategically, eliminating the Dominion Armada would have ensured the safety of Earth for generations. Politically, it would have sent a message across the galaxy that attacking human worlds carried permanent consequences. Emotionally, the humans had every justification imaginable. The Dominion had threatened their homes, their families, their entire species. Yet the humans saved them. One by one, the disabled warships were stabilized. Critical systems were repaired just enough to prevent catastrophic failures. Damaged reactors were cooled. Life support systems were restored. Human medical teams treated injured Dominion soldiers with the same care they would have given their own. It was an act of mercy so unexpected that many observers believed it must be some elaborate strategic deception. But the humans made no attempt to hide their actions. Their communication channels broadcast a single explanation to the Dominion fleet: "You are no longer under attack." Those words confused Dominion commanders more than the cyber warfare that had disabled their ships. They had come as conquerors, yet they were being treated as survivors. Eventually, the Dominion flagship regained partial control of its communication systems. Its admiral, one of the most feared commanders in their empire, received a direct transmission from Earth. Not a threat, not a negotiation, just a message. A single sentence: "Go home." That was all. No demands for surrender, no reparations, no political conditions.
The humans did not even ask the Dominion to abandon their expansionist policies. They simply gave them a choice: leave or remain stranded above a world that had already proven it could control their entire fleet. Dominion crews watched in stunned disbelief as human engineers continued restoring basic functionality to their ships. Thrusters were repaired, navigation systems were recalibrated, communication arrays were stabilized, just enough for the fleet to leave the Sol system, nothing more. And when the final Dominion warship regained propulsion capability, the humans withdrew. Their small rescue craft returned to Earth's atmosphere. No pursuit, no harassment, just quiet observation as the once mighty invasion fleet slowly began its retreat. Across the galaxy, civilizations watching the event struggled to understand what they just witnessed. A weaker species had defeated a superior military force, not through brute strength, not through overwhelming firepower, but through intelligence, control, and something far rarer in galactic history: mercy. For a brief moment, it seemed the conflict was over. The Dominion fleet limped away from Earth's orbit, carrying with it the most humiliating defeat in its empire's history. Analysts across the galaxy began predicting political consequences. The Dominion might reconsider future invasions, maybe even open diplomatic relations with humanity. Some optimists even believed the event might inspire a new era of interstellar cooperation. But those of us who'd studied history knew better. Mercy can be misunderstood, especially by empires built on conquest. The Dominion did not see compassion in humanity's actions. They saw humiliation. They saw weakness. They saw a species that had defeated them, but refused to finish the job. And in the brutal logic of imperial pride, that meant only one thing: the war was not over. It had merely been postponed. Because somewhere within the Dominion's vast territories, their leaders were already preparing a response: a larger fleet, stronger weapons, an invasion so overwhelming that no hidden defense could possibly stop it. They believed Earth had revealed its greatest secret. They believed they now understood humanity's strength. They were wrong, because the mercy the humans had shown that day was never meant to end the war. It was meant to give the Dominion one final chance to avoid it. And when that chance was ignored, the next invasion would teach the galaxy a far more terrifying lesson, not about human technology, but about humans themselves.
Humiliation is a dangerous emotion. In some species, it inspires reflection. In others, it encourages restraint. But within the Vrax Dominion, humiliation had always produced only one response: retaliation. The Dominion had not built its empire through patience or diplomacy. It had expanded through dominance, through wars that ended only when the enemy had nothing left to fight with. So when their crippled fleet returned from Earth, damaged but alive, the story they told was not one of mercy, it was one of insult. Dominion commanders described how a primitive world had disabled their ships without firing a single shot, how human engineers had boarded their vessels, how the invaders had been rescued by their intended victims, and finally, how they had been dismissed with a message so simple it burned in Dominion memory like a scar: go home. The Dominion High Council interpreted that moment differently than the rest of the galaxy. They did not see compassion. They saw weakness. In their doctrine, an enemy who refuses to destroy a defeated opponent is revealing fear, and the Dominion had never tolerated fear. So they made a decision. If the humans believed they could humiliate an empire and escape consequences, they would soon learn otherwise. The Dominion began preparing a second invasion. This time, there would be no uncertainty, no experimental tactics, no reliance on a single fleet. The Dominion mobilized everything. Across their vast territory, shipyards accelerated production schedules. Warships that had once been assigned to border patrols were recalled to the core sectors. Entire battle groups, forces normally reserved for galactic-scale conflicts, were reassigned to a single objective: Earth. Within months, the Dominion assembled the largest armada in its recorded history. Thousands of ships, dreadnoughts capable of cracking planetary crusts,
carrier fleets carrying tens of thousands of strike craft, siege platforms designed to dismantle entire planetary defense grids, weapons capable of reducing continents to ash. This was not an invasion. It was extermination. And across the galaxy, ancient civilizations watched the Dominion's mobilization with growing unease, because they understood something the Dominion did not. Earth's greatest weapon was not its cyber warfare network. It was not hidden defense platforms or clever engineering. It was something far older, something far more dangerous. Humans themselves. The Dominion fleet entered the Sol system exactly 1 year after their previous defeat. But this time, there was no laughter among the commanders. They advanced with grim determination. The Armada emerged from faster-than-light transit in waves, filling the outer reaches of the system with an ocean of warships. Thousands of engines ignited simultaneously, weapons arrays powered up, targeting systems locked onto Earth. The Dominion had studied the previous battle carefully. Their engineers believed they had solved the problem. Fleet systems had been redesigned to isolate critical networks. Command protocols were hardened against cyber intrusion. Communication channels were encrypted using algorithms the Dominion considered unbreakable. They were confident that humanity's invisible defenses would fail this time. But something was different, because the moment the fleet crossed the orbit of the outer planets, Earth responded. Human ships launched from the darkness of the asteroid belt. Not hundreds, thousands. Hidden stations scattered among the asteroids unfolded like mechanical flowers, releasing squadrons of warships that had remained invisible during the first invasion. Defense platforms rose from beneath the oceans of Earth itself, massive structures emerging from the depths to align their weapons toward the sky. And then came the drones. Millions of them. Tiny machines no larger than a human vehicle, swarming into orbit like a metallic storm. The Dominion commanders stared in disbelief as space itself seemed to come alive with movement. Earth had not been defenseless. It had simply been patient. The battle began without warning. Human railgun platforms fired the first volley, launching dense kinetic projectiles at velocities that turned even near misses into catastrophic impacts. Dominion cruisers exploded as armor plating shattered under the force of hypervelocity strikes. Carrier fleets deployed fighter swarms, but they quickly found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer number of human drones filling the battlefield. But what truly confused Dominion tacticians was the way humans fought. Most galactic militaries followed rigid doctrines, rigid formations, carefully calculated engagements. Human forces ignored all of it. Their ships maneuvered unpredictably, breaking formation constantly as pilots improvised new attack strategies mid-battle. Entire squadrons would charge directly into enemy formations, firing until their weapons overheated. When their ammunition ran out, some of them simply rammed. Damaged vessels were turned into kinetic weapons, engines pushed far beyond safe limits as pilots accelerated directly into Dominion cruisers. The resulting collisions shattered both ships. And still, the humans kept coming. Dominion commanders quickly realized something deeply unsettling about their opponents. Human forces were not fighting according to any recognizable tactical logic. They were fighting with a level of aggression that bordered on madness. When a Dominion dreadnought destroyed a human carrier group, the remaining fighters did not retreat. They attacked harder. When entire defense platforms were reduced to debris, nearby human vessels simply adapted their strategies and continued the assault. No hesitation, no surrender, no retreat. Dominion battle analysts began reporting a disturbing pattern. Human forces seemed to be willing to sacrifice anything if it created even the smallest advantage. Ships, stations, entire squadrons. The Dominion had fought countless wars across the galaxy. They had encountered species known for bravery, others known for discipline, some even famous for fanatic devotion to their causes. But this was different, because the humans were not fighting for conquest. They were not fighting for honor. They were not even fighting for victory. They were fighting for home. And that changed everything. The moment of realization came halfway through the battle. A Dominion battle group had successfully destroyed several human defense stations near Earth's orbit. From a strategic perspective, it was a significant victory. But before the Dominion ships could reposition, a swarm of damaged human vessels suddenly accelerated towards them. These ships were barely operational. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. Weapon systems had long since failed. By all logic, they should have retreated. Instead, they charged. Dominion commanders attempted to intercept them, but the human ships ignored defensive fire. They did not slow down. They did not change course. They simply accelerated. One after another, the vessels slammed into Dominion cruisers at relativistic speeds. The impacts shattered hulls like glass. Entire battle groups disintegrated in seconds. And even then, human reinforcements kept arriving. From the moon, from hidden stations beyond Mars, from deep within the asteroid belt. Every time the Dominion destroyed a wave of defenders, another appeared, and another, and another. That was the moment Dominion commanders understood the terrible truth. They had miscalculated. Not the size of Earth's defenses, not the capabilities of human technology. They had miscalculated human nature. Because humans were not fighting to win a strategic engagement. They were fighting because someone had threatened their home world. And that meant something no Dominion war doctrine could account for. They would never stop. Not when the battle turned against them, not when their ships were destroyed, not when victory became impossible. Humans would continue fighting until there was nothing left to fight with, or nothing left to fight against. And as the Dominion fleet slowly began to collapse under the relentless assault, a horrifying realization spread through their command network. They had not invaded a defenseless planet. They had invaded a species that had spent its entire history surviving the impossible. And now those survivors were defending the one place in the universe they refused to lose: Earth. But the worst lesson for the Dominion was still waiting, because even after the battle ended, humanity would prove something even more terrifying than their willingness to fight. They would prove why the galaxy tried so hard to avoid this war in the first place.
The battle for Earth did not end with a triumphant explosion. There was no final duel between admirals, no dramatic last stand above the planet's skies. Instead, it ended slowly, quietly, like a storm losing its strength. By the time the Dominion command realized the battle was truly lost, the Sol system had become a graveyard of broken ships. Thousands of vessels drifted through orbit, Dominion cruisers split open by kinetic impacts, shattered carrier hulls tumbling slowly through space, and fragments of once mighty dreadnoughts spinning in silent darkness. Human losses had been heavy as well. Defense platforms lay in ruins, entire squadrons had vanished in the chaos of the fighting. The debris of war now circled Earth like a scar across the heavens, but the Dominion fleet was finished. What remained of their armada began a desperate retreat. Damaged ships activated emergency jump drives whenever their systems could manage it. Others limped toward the edge of the system using failing propulsion engines. Some vessels never escaped at all. They simply drifted, abandoned, their crews rescued by human recovery teams moving through the battlefield. And that, once again, confused the galaxy, because the humans did not pursue. Strategically, they could have annihilated the remaining Dominion fleet. Their enemies were damaged, disorganized, and vulnerable. A final assault would have ended the Dominion as a military power for generations. But humanity did not strike the final blow. They simply stopped fighting. Human fleets withdrew to defensive positions near Earth. Drone swarms powered down. Weapons platforms went silent. Across the Sol system, human vessels began a different kind of operation: rescue missions. Salvage teams moved through the debris field, locating damaged ships, both human and Dominion. Injured survivors were pulled from broken hulls. Escape pods drifting through space were recovered. Even Dominion soldiers were treated and stabilized before being returned to the few functioning ships that remained. It was the same strange pattern the galaxy had witnessed during the first invasion. Mercy, again. Once more, humanity had defeated an enemy that came to enslave them, and once more, they refused revenge. Instead of hunting the retreating fleet, they rebuilt. Earth's orbital infrastructure was repaired piece by piece.
Defense platforms were reconstructed. Civilian satellites damaged during the battle were replaced. Within months, the Sol system looked almost peaceful again. But the most important event happened far from the battlefield. A message was sent, not to the Dominion, to the Galactic Assembly. I know this because I was the one assigned to archive it. The transmission arrived through official diplomatic channels several weeks after the battle. At the time, the Assembly was in chaos. News of the Dominion's defeat had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Entire civilizations struggled to understand how a developing species had survived and defeated the largest invasion fleet ever assembled. Rumors were everywhere. Some believed humanity had secretly allied with ancient powers. Others believed their technology must be far beyond anything the surveys had detected. Many feared that Earth was preparing to become a new galactic superpower. Then, the message arrived. It was not long, not dramatic, not filled with threats or declarations of dominance. It was simple, almost disappointingly simple. The human transmission began with a single statement: "We did not seek this war." The message continued. Human representatives explained that Earth had never intended to expand beyond its own system. They had no interest in conquest, no desire to rule other civilizations. They had built defenses because their history had taught them a painful truth: peace only survives when it can defend itself. The message ended with a request, not a demand, a request. Leave us in peace, and we will do the same. That was all. No threats, no warnings about what might happen if someone attacked again. Humanity simply stated their intentions. They wanted to live, to explore, to build their future without becoming another empire in an endless cycle of conquest. For many civilizations, the message was difficult to believe. The galaxy had grown accustomed to expansionist powers. Every advanced species eventually sought influence beyond its homeworld. But humanity did not. They defended their home with terrifying determination, yet they never tried to claim anyone else's. Over time, the truth became clear. Earth had never built massive orbital weapons for one reason: they did not want to look like a threat. Their defenses were hidden because humans preferred peace to intimidation. But that peace came with a condition. If someone tried to take their home, they would fight. Not like other species, not with predictable strategies or rigid doctrines. Humans fought with something far more dangerous: adaptation, resilience, the willingness to sacrifice everything for the one place they refused to lose. And slowly, the galaxy began to understand the lesson. Military academies rewrote their tactical simulations. Strategists began studying human warfare doctrine. Historians, like myself, documented the strange pattern that defined Earth's history. Humanity rarely started wars, but they almost always survived them. Centuries passed. New civilizations joined the Galactic Assembly. Young commanders continued asking the same question that once echoed through our chamber long ago: why does no one attack Earth? Now we have an answer. It is not written in military reports. It is not found in tactical databases. It is taught as a warning. Earth is not protected by fleets. It is not defended by shields, and it is certainly not helpless. Because the true defense of that quiet blue world has never been its technology. It has always been its people. And a species that can turn weakness into strategy, that can defeat empires without losing its compassion, that can fight with relentless determination when its home is threatened, is far more dangerous than any weapon ever built. That is why the galaxy leaves Earth alone. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Because everyone now understands the truth that the Dominion learned too late. Earth may appear defenseless, but Earth is defended by humans. And that is more than enough. But even that was not the end of the story, because centuries later, the galaxy would learn one final lesson about humanity, a lesson far stranger than war. Centuries have passed since the day the Dominion fleets burned above Earth. Empires have risen. Empires have collapsed. Borders have shifted across entire sectors of the galaxy as civilizations expanded, fought, and faded into the long archives of history. But Earth remains. Not as a galactic empire, not as the center of some conquering federation, but as something far stranger, a symbol. The Sol system is quiet now. Human ships travel its trade routes, and research stations orbit distant moons. Yet compared to the great military powers of the galaxy, Earth still appears modest. There are no intimidating armadas stationed permanently above the planet, no endless rings of orbital cannons surrounding the world. Visitors arriving in the Sol system often remark on the same thing. It looks peaceful, too peaceful. And inevitably, among the younger civilizations that recently joined the Galactic Assembly, someone always asks the same question that echoed through our chamber long ago. Why does no one attack Earth? In the past, that question was met with silence, awkward glances, careful changes of subject. But not anymore. Today, the answer is taught openly. Every military academy in the Coalition includes Earth in its strategic history courses. Every young commander studying interstellar warfare eventually encounters the same lesson. It begins with a simple warning. Do not mistake quiet for weakness. Because humanity's story did not begin among the stars. Long before they built starships, humans were already fighting wars for survival. Their homeworld was not gentle. It was unpredictable, violent, hostile to life in ways most galactic species would consider unimaginable. Ice ages buried entire continents beneath frozen oceans of snow. Diseases spread through their populations with terrifying speed. Natural disasters reshaped their planet again and again. And worst of all, humans often fought each other. Wars that consumed entire generations, weapons capable of destroying cities long before humanity ever discovered faster-than-light travel. Many civilizations would have destroyed themselves under such conditions. Some did. But humanity survived. Again, and again, and again. When their climate threatened their survival, they adapted. When plagues nearly erased them, they learned to fight disease itself. When their own conflicts pushed them toward extinction, they rebuilt their societies from the ashes. Every crisis left scars, but every crisis also made them stronger. That pattern continued when they reached the stars. Human explorers traveled cautiously at first, establishing small research outposts and trade routes rather than military strongholds. They cooperated with neighboring civilizations. They exchanged knowledge. They participated in diplomacy. Many species expected that eventually humanity would follow the same path as every other rising power: expansion, domination, empire. But that day never came. Humans did not seek to rule the galaxy. They had already learned something most civilizations discover too late. Conquest creates enemies. Peace creates allies. So Earth remained what it had always been: home. And when the galaxy looks at that quiet blue planet now, we see it differently than we once did. We no longer see weakness. We see restraint. Because behind that peaceful exterior is a species capable of extraordinary resilience. A species that can turn fragile beginnings into unstoppable momentum. A species that does not give up simply because the odds say they should. And perhaps most importantly, a species that defends its home with a determination no empire has ever managed to overcome. Young commanders sometimes struggle to understand this lesson. They study the Dominion invasions, the cyber warfare that crippled the First Fleet, the relentless resistance that shattered the Second. They examine the tactical details, the strategic decisions, the technological innovations. But eventually, they reach the same conclusion every experienced strategist already knows. Technology alone did not save Earth. Ships can be destroyed, algorithms can be countered, weapons can be matched. But human determination is far more difficult to defeat. I often tell my students the same thing when we reach the final chapter of this story.
Earth is not special because of its defenses. It is special because of the species that built them, because humans do something remarkable when faced with impossible challenges. They refuse to accept them. They adapt, they innovate, they endure, and they keep going long after other civilizations would have surrendered. That is the real reason no one attacks Earth. Not because the galaxy fears human power, but because history remembers what happens to those who test it. The Dominion learned that lesson the hard way. Their empire still exists today, though greatly diminished. And even after centuries have passed, their military doctrine contains a single rule that has never been removed. Avoid conflict with humanity. Whenever I visit the observation decks of the Galactic Assembly, I sometimes look toward the distant stars where Sol waits quietly among the spiral arms. From this distance, Earth is invisible, just another tiny world orbiting an ordinary star. Peaceful, silent, unremarkable. But I know the truth hidden behind that quiet image. That planet is home to a species that has spent its entire history surviving the impossible. And if the galaxy is wise, it will never force humanity to prove that again.